Real family only, my mother-in-law snidely said at my sister's wedding, locking me out. The Morgans arrived next. Now she's begging for forgiveness. In the peaceful atmosphere of the Yale University Art Museum, I found myself deeply involved in getting a new exhibition ready. The gentle light of the early summer was pouring in through the tall windows, softly bouncing off the edges of the frames of the paintings that were made in Flanders in the 1600s. I always considered those moments of having such a personal connection with the art as the best part of my job as a curator. Olivia, do you have a minute? Ashley, my sister-in-law's voice, cut through my thoughts via my phone, causing me to stop what I was doing. Her wedding was happening in a couple of weeks, and she'd been calling me pretty often lately to talk about all the planning that was going on. Sure, Ashley, what's up? Her voice sounded much less happy than it usually did. I'd heard that my mother-in-law had taken control over picking the venue. They were unaware that my family possessed Morgan Celebrations, a very fancy chain of wedding venues in Connecticut. Because I didn't want to be evaluated because of where I came from, I hadn't let Daniel's family know about this. I found myself reflecting on how I first met Daniel. Since he was a doctor for children at Yale New Haven Hospital, we met during a children's art therapy program at the museum. His honest nature and the fact that he was so interested in my work instantly attracted me. I really desired to keep our relationship as it was, with him accepting me for who I was, not because of my social standing or family. It was because of this that I made the conscious decision not to talk about what my family did. I remembered the day of my own wedding, a year after we were married. Even back then, Catherine, my mother-in-law, always put on a classy, composed smile, but her eyes never seemed warm when she looked at me. Being a former model and a frequent attendee of high-end social gatherings, she might have thought a museum curator wasn't good enough for her son. Ashley told me they'd settled on Morgan Celebrations. I gasped inwardly. It was my family's venue, and they'd picked the most exclusive spot in Greenwich. Mother says it has to be there, she'd explained. But the money, I shut my eyes for a moment. I'd already heard from my folks. When my mother-in-law came for a tour, Dad, realizing she was part of my in-law's family, offered their $150,000 wedding package at an especially low price. For $50,000, he'd added, because it's our daughter's new family. Instead of seeming shocked by this offer, my mother-in-law acted like it was what she deserved based on her social standing. My parents didn't say anything, probably mindful of my place in all this. Don't worry, Ashley, it'll be a gorgeous wedding. After I hung up the phone, I stared out the window, lost in my thoughts. My husband, Daniel, tried to stay out of the conflict between his mom and me by avoiding any family discussions. Even though he was confident and capable as a pediatrician dealing with emergencies, he seemed incredibly hesitant when it came to family drama. That night, my tired husband leaned against me as soon as he got home. I heard from Mom about the venue, he sighed. His voice held a hint of concern. I squeezed his hand lightly in response. Everything is going to be okay. Today is Ashley's big day. But the people working at the location recognized who I was, the owner's offspring. I couldn't help but wonder what my husband's mom would say when she discovered that. A wave of unease washed over me. I let out a long breath, picturing the elegant Greenwich location, illuminated by the soft, early summer sunlight. When I made it back to the museum, twilight was starting to settle in. We had barely finished half of the work to get the exhibition ready. I switched my focus back to those Flemish paintings, trying to concentrate. Art just has this special quality, you know, it possesses a real strength that eases my thoughts and lets me observe things clearly. There are 14 days until the wedding. Despite the quiet of the gallery, I felt that chaos was about to begin. Nevertheless, I opted to stay positive, trusting my husband and my family. That morning, the wedding day was filled with beautiful, early summer light. Even though I'd been to my family's place a million times before, there was something off about this morning. Walking towards the door, I could see the employees rushing around. They'd been at it since dawn. The main entryway was beautifully decorated with a structure made of pristine white roses and lilacs. Beneath it, security personnel, looking sharp in their dark suits, greeted everyone with a smile. The whole scene felt meticulously planned and sophisticated. I pulled into the parking space I was supposed to use and took a long, slow breath. Getting through today with a smile, that was my mission. Ashley deserved that much. I told myself to calm down as I exhaled slowly. As I let go of the steering wheel, I reinforced the idea. "Good morning," I said quietly. The security guard courteously opened the door for me. Even though the workers knew this was my family's place and would usually show me extra respect, I figured my dad told them to treat me like any other person today. "I'm Olivia Brown," I stated calmly. The security guard, however, looked at his tablet, then double-checked it, and his face showed his confusion. Seeing his expression, my heart began to race a little. I'm so sorry, but your name isn't listed. Those words made me feel like time had stopped. There has to be some kind of error, I said. I'm the bride's sister-in-law. I tried really hard to stop my voice from shaking. Guests were starting to show up, those from high society wearing designer clothes like Oscar de la Renta and Calvin Klein, and giving us curious glances. The security guard glanced at his device again and gave me an apologetic shake of his head. I have to apologize, but your name isn't on the list, I'm afraid. At that point, I understood what was going on. This wasn't just a mistake. I subtly pulled my phone from my purse and punched in my mother-in-law's number. After a few rings, her voice, unmistakable, answered. Olivia, why are you calling so early? Her voice sounded cheerful. Trying to remain composed under the watchful eyes nearby, I answered as calmly as I could. Catherine, it appears my name isn't on the guest list. Oh yes, so you actually showed up. The family area is for, real family. Those words echoed in my ears, accompanied by a sophisticated chuckle. Something inside me felt like it had stopped working. But I'm Daniel's wife, I said. Yes, on paper, but you're still not the right fit. I quietly put my phone away. Only then did I realize my hands were shaking just a little bit. I inhaled deeply. The bewildered security guard was still standing in front of me. I could hear guests all around us, having seen what had happened, murmuring to each other. Isn't she the bride's sister-in-law? I thought it's awful that she wasn't allowed in. I wonder what went wrong. Then I looked through the entrance hall and saw Ashley in her pristine white Vera Wang wedding gown moving towards the makeup room. She hadn't seen me. If she found out about this now, it would absolutely destroy her wedding day. I reached for my phone once again. This time I dialed my dad's number. Daddy. My voice was shaky. However, the words that followed from him completely calmed me down. He told me, I'm coming now. He added, I'm bringing the attorney with me. Even through his normally easygoing tone, I could detect my dad's firm resolve. I gently shut my eyelids. Dad, please don't hurry, I thought. The wedding won't commence for 60 more minutes. He replied, I know, but I couldn't let you wait any longer than necessary. After I ended the call, I sat down on a bench situated next to the entrance. The deep blue of my Carolina Herrera dress wonderfully sparkled from the morning sunshine. I watched as the guests kept flowing in, disappearing into the building like things were normal. I was trying to sort everything out in my mind. Doing so, I began thinking about the meaning of family, along with my role in it. Did I make the right choice by concealing details about what we do for a living? How would all this affect my connection with my husband? I knew what my father was implying by bringing the lawyer. It was far more than simple vengeance. It would be the time when secrets that had been kept for so long would be revealed. About 60 minutes went by. Throughout this time, my husband had tried to call me 3 times, but I hadn't picked up. I wanted to wait until my folks got there before explaining things to him. In the distance, a really fancy black Rolls-Royce Phantom appeared. It was the car my family only used for significant occasions. The car reflected the sun's light as it slowly came toward the entrance with real elegance. I noticed James, who has driven us for years, in the driver's seat. The car pulled up and stopped right in front of the entrance, and Michael Steinberg, the lawyer, was the first one out of the passenger side, sporting a gray suit. He'd been a friend of Dad's for 3 decades and the Morgan family's legal advisor. Next, from the back seat, came my parents, William and Margaret, looking so elegant. Dad was wearing a navy suit from Brooks Brothers, and he seemed even more distinguished than usual. Mom had on a Chanel suit, and she carried herself with the poise of someone in the British royal family. Olivia, sorry to have kept you waiting, Mom said, her voice as gentle as always, yet also full of quiet strength. The staff couldn't disguise their shock at the sudden arrival of the owners. The security guard bowed quickly and low. Mr. Morgan, is that you? My father just gave the security guard a little nod, then headed straight toward me. Honey, I'm so sorry you had to go through this, Dad said. Hearing that, I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I quickly wiped them away using the handkerchief that Mom offered. William, let's go talk with the mother-in-law first, Mom said, and Dad just quietly agreed. Lawyer Steinberg shifted his grip on the thick bunch of papers he was holding. Suddenly, a commotion started happening in the entrance. When I looked up, I saw my mother-in-law, Catherine, standing on the balcony above us, dressed in an Oscar de la Renta suit. What do you think you're doing here? She demanded. We're in the middle of a wedding. My mother-in-law's voice was still dripping with self-assuredness. But then her face went completely blank after my dad spoke. It turned out we actually own this whole place. There's a significant issue that's come up involving the existing agreement. Suddenly, the mood in the air shifted. I noticed my future mother-in-law's hand shake a little as she held onto the balcony. You mean you are? Mrs. Catherine, the lawyer Steinberg, stepped forward. The standard cost for today's wedding package is $150,000. If the terms of the special deal they had are no longer valid, you'll need to pay the extra $100,000 right away. My mother-in-law's complexion became pale. Standing right behind her on the balcony, my father-in-law, Richard, looked concerned and put his hand on her shoulder. Inside the hallway on the second floor, I could see my sister-in-law, Ashley, in her wedding gown, seemingly unable to understand what was going on. What's happening? Ashley's voice was shaky. Just then we heard someone running up the stairs. When I turned, there was my husband, Daniel. His face was displaying a level of anger I hadn't witnessed before. "Mom, why would you do this?" Daniel's words resonated throughout the quiet room. Catherine avoided her son's gaze. "Our social standing." "That's enough," Daniel interrupted his mother's attempt to explain. "As of today, I'm finished with my family." "Daniel, you can't be serious," my mother-in-law's voice broke. "I am serious. I cannot forgive how you've treated Olivia." In that moment, my mother-in-law's legs started to give out, and my father-in-law moved quickly to steady her. I put my hands over my eyes. With just half an hour to go until the wedding and my mother-in-law's bad knees causing an issue, the start of the ceremony was definitely at risk. My dad started to ascend the staircase very quietly. He had the air of someone incredibly important and refined. My mom and Steinberg, my lawyer, followed him. I stayed put on the ground floor, looking up at the situation unfolding. "Dad," I murmured under my breath, "please just be careful with this." Unfortunately, things had already moved too far to be fixed. The light from the gigantic chandelier quietly observed the drama happening. The wedding staff and guests gathered in the foyer were all holding their breath as they watched it unfold. From the room upstairs, I could hear soft crying. Ashley. I felt a wave of anxiety because I knew how much this day meant to her. And now, the argument between my dad and my mother-in-law was about to get underway. It was crystal clear this was going to alter all of our lives considerably. I took a deep, slow breath and started to walk up the stairs. The big door of the waiting room softly closed, and the room was filled with a palpable tension. Everyone involved had crowded into the large room, which was filled with expensive furniture. Catherine, my mother-in-law, was perched on the edge of the couch, fiddling nervously with the sleeve of her fancy suit. Sitting next to her, Richard, my father-in-law, was trying to comfort her by gently holding her hands. "Mrs. Catherine," my father said, his voice soft but firm, "what's your take on this whole thing?" My mother-in-law glanced down for a second, then lifted her head as though she'd reached a conclusion. I was mistaken. Her tone lacked its typical air of superiority. Ashley kept on crying, dressed in her pristine white wedding gown. James, her husband-to-be, stood beside her, placing his hand on her shoulder to try and console her. He looked both puzzled and unhappy. "Daniel, please," Ashley pleaded, her voice quivering. She was talking to Daniel, her brother. "Don't distance yourself from Mom." I watched everything play out in silence. I just knew in my gut that something was about to shift drastically here, right now. My mom moved forward, her movements smooth, and began to speak softly. "Ashley, I'm truly sorry that we've turned your special day into something unpleasant." Hearing this, the tension in the room seemed to lessen just a bit. It was my mother's uncanny ability. Whenever things got heated, she had a way of calming everyone with her grace and carefully chosen words. But looking down at his papers, the lawyer, Steinberg, went on, "This isn't merely about a wedding, it's a major contract breach that could damage Morgan's celebration's standing." That's when I made up my mind. I walked forward. "Please overlook her actions just for today." Everyone present immediately turned their attention towards me. "It's Ashley's day after all. She's pure and blameless in all of this." My dad scowled. "But Olivia, remember the way she treated you." "I understand," I replied calmly. "But we're a family. Maybe this can be a chance to create new connections right here today." Daniel came over and tenderly took my hand. "Olivia," he said, his tone full of affection and satisfaction. My mother-in-law quickly stood and moved to face me. For the first time, I could see genuine feelings in her eyes. "Olivia, my mother-in-law struggled to speak, and a single tear traced a path down her face. "I've acknowledged how wrong I was. You truly are the perfect partner for my son." The room's entire vibe completely changed once she said that. Ashley's crying ceased, and her fiancé, James, exhaled with evident relief. My dad took a deep breath, then finally made up his mind. "Fine," he said, nodding towards lawyer Steinberg. "Let's settle on some special payment arrangements. Could we set it up so the final $100,000 is paid in 60 monthly installments?" Richard, my father-in-law, softly suggested. "We'll make sure we pay it every month." After some consideration, my dad slowly nodded. "I agree." "Let's update the legal paperwork." My mother-in-law gave a deep bow. "Thank you, and I'm sincerely sorry." Ashley rushed over and wrapped her arms tightly around me. "Olivia, thanks," she said, her voice shaky from happiness and tears. Still, Daniel's face stayed serious. "Mom, even after today's wedding, things probably won't just go back to the way they were." "I know," my mother-in-law responded softly. "Please give me a chance to gradually earn back your confidence." Through the window, we could watch the guests continue to stream into the location. The delicate fragrance of white roses permeated the room. Okay then, my mother announced cheerfully. Let's make this a spectacular wedding. I'm going to really utilize my event director expertise developed while working for Margaret Morgan. Ashley's expression brightened noticeably when I said that. You mean like the asterisk Mrs. Morgan? My own mother gave a gracious smile. Yes, she replied, for this special event. The employees started to move with increased urgency, following my mother's fresh directions. I gave Daniel's hand a firm squeeze. He responded with a quiet nod. Our family was stepping into a new chapter after surviving this challenging time. But there were still unresolved issues. The process of mending our relationship wouldn't be easy. Even so, right now, in that very instant, we'd accomplished a significant milestone. My mother-in-law stood in front of the mirror, touching up her appearance. The haughtiness she usually displayed was absent from her face. I could see a mixture of remorse and optimism in her gaze. My dad finished signing the papers and clicked the cap back onto his pen. That sound felt symbolic of the start of something fresh and new. All right, let's make this a truly spectacular wedding. My mother's voice, filled with warmth, echoed throughout the room. The cloudless sky over Greenwich was perfectly visible through the window. The soft light of early summer seemed to highlight the fresh connection within our family. I exhaled slowly. This was just the true genesis. A whole year has gone by since that moment. The Brown family home, situated in Greenwich's affluent neighborhood, had lost its austere vibe and now radiated a welcoming atmosphere. The recently planted roses in the garden were in full bloom, their scent carried along by the gentle summer air. Daniel and I had just moved into a house in a tranquil New Haven neighborhood, not long after Ashley got married. The Yale University Art Museum was only a 15-minute drive away, plus it was near my husband's hospital. This new chapter in our lives was giving us a sense of calm. My mother-in-law had really transformed since the wedding. Little by little, she started staying away from those fancy parties, opting instead to volunteer with local organizations that helped kids. It seemed to come about so easily, it was a shock to everyone. I remember when Daniel was a little boy, whenever I'm with the children, she shared at a lunch we had together just the other day. There was nothing of her old arrogance in her eyes. The monthly payments were always on time. It wasn't just about money, it showed how determined they were to make things right and build a new bond. Ashley and James, her husband, had started their married life in San Francisco. Now and then, she sends photos from a small sushi place that's run by a Japanese chef she had met. The table manners Mom taught me are actually useful here, she wrote, putting a sincere smile on my mother-in-law's face. The biggest shift might be her dedication to doing charity work. She used her network to set up a scholarship for kids from disadvantaged backgrounds. When my father heard what she was up to, he offered to help through Morgan's celebrations. People truly do change, my mother whispered to me one time. Because you were so kind that day, everything changed for us. Really, what happened at that wedding created a huge shift within our family dynamic, but it wasn't the end, it felt more like a fresh start. This past spring, I got a letter addressed to my mother-in-law. The script was beautiful and the words inside were full of contemplation and optimism. Olivia, when I remember that day, I still feel bad about how silly I was. But because of your empathy, I was able to understand what truly matters. My son's joy doesn't come from how other people perceive us or from outward shows of wealth, but from genuine connections with people we love. At the letter's end was an unexpected proposition. She asked if she could throw a family dinner at the Greenwich mansion during the Christmas holiday. I felt a wave of warmth rise within me as I read those words. Last week we said yes to my mother-in-law's invitation, and we all got together for a meal, something we hadn't done in a while. Her favorite china, the limach, was on the table, and the chef had made these stunning dishes. However, what really stood out was my mother-in-law's genuine smile. There were no signs of her ever worrying about what others thought or trying to seem like we belonged to a certain social level. She was just happy to be with her family. She seemed like a whole different person, just enjoying our time together. In fact, she actually started as the dessert was being brought out. After pausing for a moment, she continued. I was considering organizing a charitable activity for kids at Morgan festivities. My dad gave his approval right away, and my mom was more than willing to lend a hand. Ashley, joining us through a video call, seemed absolutely thrilled. That's a fantastic plan, I said genuinely. The aroma of roses coming from the garden drifted into the dining area as evening approached. Daniel gave my hand a soft squeeze and gave a nod. It was a time when the fresh connections we'd forged over the past 12 months felt real and present. Later, while I was putting together a fresh exhibit at the Yale University Art Museum, something suddenly clicked. I thought about how our lives are similar to the artwork found here in the museum. Occasionally, there might be somber moments, but when the light hits things differently, they show entirely new perspectives. My mother-in-law is starting to illuminate her life with a newfound optimism. Plus, we're still working on creating our family masterpiece together. Early summer sun poured into the museum garden from the window, almost like a benediction on our new chapter.